Yeah.
Okay, so Tim and Emmie, please go ahead.
Okay, great. So we left off from the last talk in Norway, and we brought the boat down back to the UK at the end of that season, with the intention of then sailing on that year. We didn't, because that year 2017 had a particularly tempestuous September, so we ended up hunkering down in Plymouth for that winter and then setting off the year after. So that's 2018 that this this kind of presentation starts, and that actually turned out quite fortuitous, really, because then we had the entire season or the entire summer to work our way down there. So that meant we actually took the long way around Biscay, all the way through Brittany and northern Spain, Asturias, up into the Picos de Europa, and then down Portugal, and just took our time, really. So we didn't actually get to the Canaries until August, perhaps.
Yeah, so it was August. It was in the heat of August. And we were met not actually quite with the scenes that we were expecting. So I didn't know the Canaries at all. We arrived at night and were just amazed to what we woke up to the next day.
Yeah, so I started with this screen because this is kind of what we expected the Canaries to be like. And it is actually this. Oops, let me try and this is actually more representative of what we remember the Canaries to be. So I'll start off with that kind of picture in mind. We set off from Lisbon I'll tell you what, we'll just summarize for those of you that didn't join the last one. We'll just summarize the boat. So that's Shadowfax, built in Falmouth, heavyweight, no racehorse, but safe, solid, and you'll do very well to get the tow rail into the water. That's the interior of it. So that's our home.
Nice and light inside. Big windows though, which Tim were in this picture. It's reinforced with stormboards on the outside, which is why it's not that clear. Which this was taken recently, so we need to, now we're down in Cornwall, we need to take those off. But a slightly different layout to some boats, with quite a big sort of saloon area, and then six berths.
Six berths, and but the bunk room has been converted into a workshop. So that just kind of gives you an idea of the boat. So we set off from Lisbon straight to the north of Lanzarote, and we were given that we really didn't know an awful lot about the Canaries, as I said, and we really only planned to spend 3 weeks there before shooting on down to Senegal. And we were told, oh, well, best to make landfall in around Lanzarote and this little island north of Lanzarote called Graciosa, and that's probably the best way because you have the northeast trades, and then you can work your way across the island chain if that's what you wanted to do. So we had a really good run down from there, averaged about 6.5 knots, which on an average over a long passage for us is not too bad. And there's the first island that actually is not Graciosa, but that's when we first saw the islands coming in into focus. But we then pulled into the next anchorage, into the anchorage in Graciosa, and in pitch darkness with no moonlight, dropped the anchor, and we weren't entirely sure what to expect the next morning. But this is what we woke up to when we went ashore, and just a wonderful playground of volcanic rock that looked like a dessert that had kind of melted. And it was just a nice surprise, really. I suppose we were just expecting lots of hotels and beaches and stuff. And even though we knew Graciosa necessarily wasn't like, that's more what we kind of expected.
Colours are absolutely amazing. and we were able to explore by foot, because this first island is virtually car free, which is lovely.
And then, yeah, straight away, just like discovering really interesting plants and formations, different like lichens and mosses.
The other thing is that so Graciosa right off to the east side, and has the biodiversity is really interesting, despite the fact that it looks very bleak. There's 350 different types of seaweed, for example, in the sea, and so it's a marine conservation area. But also as a result of that, the bird life is amazing. They have all sorts of slightly unusual birds of prey that we weren't expecting to find there. Should we try and get the notes up?
I'm not sure if the notes will appear when, I think they might appear when the slides appear.
Okay.
We've got some notes on a bit of history and kind of culture along the way, so we're hoping those notes, those presenter notes, will pop up for us.
Because I've put something already.
Oh.
That's not going to come.
Okay. We're not entirely sure how to show our presenter notes, so we might end up missing some of the dates and stuff. The actual islands they start, they're the oldest around Fuerteventura and Lanzarote, and then they get younger and younger all the way to El Hierro. But Fuerteventura is the oldest at 22 million years, which you wouldn't really kind of think, but I suppose in geological times that's quite young. And so north of, actually, a lot of people think that Graciosa is the smallest and most northerly island, but in fact, the most northerly island of the Canaries is Alegranza, and that is completely uninhabited and is in fact a reserve. So we thought, oh, well, let's get up there and go and see what we can find, even though we were told that we weren't allowed to go on shore. And the anchorage you can see at the bottom there. And that is Alegranza. And for those of you who want to make landfall there, if you haven't been there already, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but in the middle there's a big reef, which is a fantastic place to snorkel, but that is not on the charts, or at least the charts we had. So do be careful of that, because it's only a couple of feet under the water at the highest point.
It's also, so it is a bird reserve, and there's notices when you get there to say no landing for obvious reasons. However, we just took the dinghy and went to have a look at the coastline, and as we were doing that, there actually appeared to be someone on land, which was surprising, because as far as we knew, it was uninhabited. So it looked like a kind of hermity type chap.
Yeah, a guy kind of bent over, looked like a golem on the side, just kind of over by the rocks.
Picking shells.
And it turned out that, in fact, he lived in this little house just here, up on the top there. And this amazing little dwelling, and he has this little pool down here, and there's some ladders into it, just an awesome little place. And it turned out that he actually, along with his family, owned the island, and it's been in his family for a number of generations.
He described himself as indigenous, and that he talked about bygone times when how his family had survived on the island, and he then invited us to come up for a drink, and we helped him de-shell his I think it was it winkles?
Yeah, winkles. Yeah, we can see them
winkles?
in the jar there. So we were eating. I mean, they're not a great fan of
much to Tim's
winkles
horror at this point.
But
he then put them with balsamic vinegar and was like, "Come on, yeah, you must have some."
Yeah, really nice chap though.
Behind him is a map of quite an old map, which shows where his family would have cultivated things around the salt and various other things on this very barren island.
So the next day, well, firstly we were saying, oh, can we dive on the island, because usually you need a permit, and he was like, oh, now you're my friends, if I say you can dive, you can dive. So we did some amazing snorkeling and diving there, and then he also invited us onto the island to go and see where his father was buried. And from the aerial view you can see this huge, perfectly round crater, and so that's what we did.
Wow. Vale, mi padre está enterrado allí. ¿Qué te parece, Timothy?
I've cut that video off short because it goes on for a while, so that's why it stops abruptly. The other thing that Kike, who is the chap you saw there, told us that there was this cave or this magma chamber which had collapsed, and these chambers exist all under the Canaries, but this one had collapsed, leaving this tunnel through to this this lagoon with a collapsed roof. And we took the dinghy into that, which was just an awesome little find, and the water going through to it was super clear, and was really our kind of first well, this kind of formed first of a lot of snorkeling and diving and just messing around under the water.
From the outside, the lagoon is almost virtually hidden amongst the pumice rock, and you go through quite a small dark entrance, and particularly if you're snorkeling or diving and you're wondering what on earth you're going to come across. And then it was amazing to kind of be inside what would have been a lava chamber.
Well, and also have it to ourselves. Like we're kind of expecting thousands of tourists, and there's just nobody. And it's just a real playground for if you've got a boat. So from there, Graciosa straight to Lanzarote. Not a difficult sail. You're in the lee of the land for the north, or kind of the lee of the land, so it's nice, fast downwind sailing to Lanzarote, which again is very moon-like and barren, and we thought, okay, the best way to see this is from Arrecife is to just get on the bikes, deploy the bikes, and get to see it that way. So there's a short clip here. Kind of gives you an idea of what the landscape was like with all these little volcanoes popping out. In fact, Lanzarote erupted for 6 days straight in the 1700s, and then in about 1824 erupted again. So some of it is geologically incredibly recent. And the roads are just fantastic for cycling, no cars, smooth. They weren't all this straight, but this is just a really cool photo, and actually a really good rundown for us.
I was really keen to go and see this this studio by a well-known artist who had lived there in the 60s, known as Cézanne Manique, who's been actually a really big influence throughout the islands, because at that point when tourism was starting to boom and architecture was starting to crop up really quickly, he was quite integral in trying to influence mass tourism to not have so much impact on the island, and which is why
And he tried to influence the architecture of the apartment block to be a bit more in keeping with the traditional designs of the island. And
so while he was looking for somewhere to call home, he was traveling around the lava fields and came across these chambers, and actually ended up building his own house amongst the chambers. It was the most amazing studio that I've seen. The pictures don't quite do it justice here, but the concept is all very kind of cleanly done. It's quite sculptural inside. So he's got kind of under subterranean gardens, a swimming pool, and his own studio space that he used from there. And he also managed to integrate the Aboriginal design with the landscape as well. The kind of how the houses would have been originally. So it was just really amazing seeing that, and also how he had various other places that he kind of brought his influence to on the other islands.
Gives you more of an idea of where we went cycling around the area that had erupted only in the 1700s, 1800s.
Total moonscape.
Yeah.
And influenced by his house, then we actually ended up, so we were camping en route, and at that point we decided that we'd camp in a crate, well, in part of like a lava field.
Yeah, I mean, these lava fields, you could just wander around them, and there would be these caverns, and it actually made a pretty nice place to camp.
It's quite sheltered.
Yeah. These are I've got some notes on these, and I've got all the names of them, but they're basically divots that have been dug out by hand, and they grow wine on the island. And the rock manages to kind of hygroscopically store moisture. So when you in the morning, when you brush your hand over the volcanic rock, it's still moist underneath, even though it's incredibly dry. And presumably it's condensation from the sea air, because they see very little water in Lanzarote. Anyway, it gives what is a really nice sweet wine, quite strong and concentrated.
In this part of the island erupted in about about mid 1770s, and they obviously couldn't do any agriculture at that point apart from grow wine, where actually it does make a really quite an interesting and unusual wine. It's quite, as Tim was saying, it's quite sweet, and it's quite, the grapes that they get are small, but the soil is actually very fertile when it comes to this. So they've made these chambers to also protect them from the wind, which would otherwise not be great.
The other thing, if you get a chance, if you go to the Canaries and you put your boat into Arrecife, is just in Arrecife is a ship, which again, we've got some notes on this, but we can't see them. So this ship basically came in with a load of timber and had to be put aground because it was leaking, and it's just laid there ever since. And it's this awesome playground to go and snorkel. You can crawl in through the holes in the side here, and then get inside and snorkel around, and there's fish, and you can snorkel through the engine bay in relative safety. You don't need to be a diver to do this.
Just a disclaimer, is there are very big notices on the outside before getting in saying this is dangerous, no entry. So we did stop on our tracks a bit at that point, and then thought we'd maybe just go and have a little look, at which point we find various other people who are also out there, including, we then actually swim in through a hole into it, and it's just the light in there and the way that it's shimmering through what's left of the boat is incredible. At this point, there's I think a couple of dogs have swum in with their owners as well, and then there's actually ropes which have been attached up into the ship itself.
Yeah, so you can go wandering around all the different cabins, and
so we climbed up through it.
And we're not condoning this. If you want to go and do it, it's by your own risk.
The boat has cracked in two, and is also very good for diving on the other part of it. In the end, the wreck was the the ship, the resources were not found to actually to repair it, and so no one's really taken responsibility for it. They may try and get rid of it at some point.
There are a number of other wrecks for diving around the Canaries, but this one particularly, if you're not a diver, is just great for getting the experience and snorkeling. So from there, we're now getting into September, and we sailed down Fuerteventura, down the coast. Again, really easy downwind sailing, super smooth, fast, and arrived at, I was going to say arrived at Gran Tarajal, but meanwhile, the other advantage of sailing along a coast where the northeast trades, along that sort of coast where you've got a northeast trade, is a constant supply of animals,
exotic animals. And unfortunately, this was not the only one we found.
We had a whole zoo.
A unicorn was also rescued.
I got it. Flamingo rescue once again.
And just a quick note to say, yeah, the talk last week was really impressive and terrifying, and yeah, and then you've just got flamingos and unicorns just floating off into the sea from the nearest beach.
Adding plenty more ocean plastic. Anyway, we rescued the ones we could. I think we ended up with an alligator, turtle, unicorn, flamingo. Anyway, so yeah, sailing along the coast with the sun setting over to the west, and arriving in a nice little town called Gran Tarajal, where Emmie deploys her art stuff.
So this piece, we sailed in, it was really nice and calm. The sun's just setting and the light is really beautiful. It's quite a modern town actually, but the angle and the composition all came together at that point. So I'd prepared a board already that I was traveling with. So I can put some, I'm able to put some boards, sort of stash them under the beds or wherever there's a nice flat space. I was just waiting for the right moment to start this piece. So as we came in, the colors were really intense of the golden hour as the sun goes down.
And that is actually gold at the top there. That is gold leaf. And
there's sort of a little bit of, because it does feel on these islands like the whole thing's could erupt. Actually, again, it doesn't, although it has been a number of centuries since it had erupted, then it does feel like that could happen again. So the buildings here kind of layer slightly into the mountains behind.
Simon, could we just have a sound check? We don't know if we're still here. We can't.
Yep, you're all good.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Just a quick one, just to kind of give you the topography of Fuerteventura. That's roughly speaking what it looks like from the highest point. And
which you and Ginny climbed up.
Our friend Ginny that visited us. Similar, lots of little volcanoes to go and hike up. No tourists at all venturing inland. Plenty on the south coast, but nothing. No, you just don't see any at all inland. Oh yeah.
No image here.
No image here. So we actually arrived back to. I arrived back to the boat with my friend Ginny. Emmie was back in the UK finishing off some pieces, and our friend Ginny was hoping for a nice, gentle week of sailing. Arrived back to absolute carnage,
devastation.
And a rat had got on board the boat and gnawed its way through absolutely everything, pooped on absolutely everything, but amazingly didn't chew through any cables or anything too important, because it actually left loads of provisions on, so it had plenty of time to get through those and not chew on anything too important apart from the sensor for the water tank.
Grand Tarahel Desert, we found out afterwards.
Grand Tarahel does have a rat
does
problem.
have a problem.
So if you go there, just make sure you're not stupid like me and leave a way in.
But you did afterwards decide that by putting bottles or half empty bottles onto the ropes, that would kind of make it too
Yeah,
difficult
possibly. Yeah,
for it to get up.
or at least in anyway, I don't really want to say what happened next because there might be some people that might be offended, but El Rat.
Thankfully, it didn't seem to have gnawed through the cables as far as we know. So
No.
that's been.
But El Rat was extinguished and in some form or another. So I then single-handed over to Gran Canaria, to Las Palmas, where I had a few days on my own. There's a little video here. I made this actually crossing over to Las Palmas. It doesn't show a whole lot of sailing, but it's the kind of, I think it just sums up sailing in the Canaries in terms of good winds, good climate, fairly gentle at times.
Quite consistent.
So that, and many of you who have been to Gran Canaria will know Las Palmas is the busy anchorage outside of the marina. Really, a really great system, really. You go and pop yourself in the anchorage, go to the office, and they tell you when to come in. You might spend a day there, you might spend 7 days there, but once you're in, you're in. You can't book ahead, but once you're in, you can stay there for as long as you like. They can't kick you out after a certain amount of time. And all the mooring is stern or bow to, and then you're wrapped up against the other boats, which in fact, with any sort of swell, is actually the best way to be. You can leave your boat there and not have to worry about chafing through, or your tow rails getting rubbed out with your mooring line, with your fender lines. It's a really great place to leave the boat, to be honest. And it's also a bit cloudy, so you're not getting UV damage a lot of the time.
It was quite fortuitous, in fact, because later on we would come back here and leave the boat for what turned out to be a long time during leaving it for lockdown last year, as I'm sure that some other people's boats may unfortunately be there or be there.
Yeah,
still.
I mean, the boat got locked down here for quite a while, and we were lucky because it was very good value, very safe, and there was very next to no chafe. Whereas in some of the other marinas we've been, you'd leave your boat for a few weeks, and with the constant swell, the lines have chafed through. So we were quite fortunate.
The only thing being sandstorms off Morocco do happen not infrequently. But overall, the southern anchorages on the islands are a lot less swelly than the northern ones, where we did also leave it at one point, and was a lot more nerve-wracking.
So again, once we got to Las Palmas, we kind of expected this, and it is like this on the south coast, but as soon as you go just a few miles inland or on the other coasts and not the south coast, then this is what it's like. And
really claw-like mountains, not what you'd expect at all. They're quite high, some of them, but also it's starting to get a bit greener here.
Yeah, so some of you, often on the north sides of all of the islands, particularly once you get to Gran Canaria onwards, it's green. And whilst I was waiting for Emmie to arrive, I thought it'd be a very good opportunity to go and rent a motorbike.
Elevate and
So yeah, if you're into sailing and you're also into motorcycling, Gran Canaria, well, a lot of them, to be honest, are just fantastic places to get off road. Easy dirt tracks, just an awesome place to ride, really. The walks through all of the Canarian pine forests are just marvelous, as I'm sure lots of you know if you've been to the Canaries. This might bring up some memories of that smell of the pine forests.
There's one or two which are busier, which are the sort of known walks. But then aside from that, there's quite a big area, which is a big national park where you can get off and see virtually no one during the day. Unfortunately, here afterwards was actually devastated by forest fires. But despite the fact that there's quite close patrolling of the fires in the summer months, but these pines have an amazing propensity to be able to weather some of the fires. So they have very thick bark, which means that often they will go on to survive.
Yeah, we met a really nice guy in El Hierro, which is a later island, who was a firefighter, and he explained how the Canarian pine had developed to withstand fires. Okay, so before we left Gran Canaria, we knew of this rock called Roc Nublo, and we also heard, I happened to have a friend on board at the time who was a climber, and I used to climb with him quite a lot, and we thought, well, it would be rude not to have a go. Roc Nublo stands for or translates to rock in the clouds, and we had a crack. It was a lot more difficult than the route suggested it would be, but gives you an idea of scale. It's not huge, but it's maybe 2 or 3 pitches up there. And there it is, rock in the clouds. And we started off with it being perfectly clear, and got to the top.
Oh, it's just clearing up, Jam.
Oh,
we might get to see something.
There's something down there. There's something down there.
So,
There is definitely mountains and forest all around us, but we're just imagining
it's
it
quite
right now.
It's quite a mystical rock, this one. And what was funny is, because I was below it at this point, is that as the clouds came in, but the voices continued from up above. So as quite a lot of people arrived to see it, the rock, there was just these voices which were kind of emanating from the clouds.
So we then sailed down the kind of north coast, because it was so nice, that coast, and I'd seen it before when I was on the bike. This was kind of typical sailing in the Canaries, just tootling along, bit of swell, but just really nice. And typical in the Canaries, which some of you may know, is they have these things called acceleration zones. So you can go from this, and very quickly you're in this. This was about 45 knots, just around the corner. We tried to anchor up, and we were in about 65 knots. But it's actually pretty safe. The sea state is not representative of 65 knots. It's boisterous, but you just reef up and just go along with it, hopefully not going upwind. And then very quickly you're back to flat calm again. And as you can see, we're all reefed up there under almost storm sails, and there's nothing.
However, it was probably not the moment to go for lunch, which is what we did on that day, with friends on board. Nice to go off for a bit of lunch. Tim's looking increasingly worried and heads quickly back to the boat to kind of check it's all okay. The dinghy, it's so windy by this point, the dinghy's actually almost gets flipped over. The
dinghy's it's tied onto is tied onto the back and on the painter, and it actually basically was taking off with a 4 horsepower outboard attached to the back of it.
Anyway, we all got our fish sandwiches and kind of got more or less safely back on board.
Well, we jumped back on board and just took off. Let's get out of here.
We were just quite, we knew about the acceleration zones. We hadn't really quite experienced it much by that point. And it was yeah, it was strong for sure.
Yeah, so you can see the acceleration zones there, and they are really specific as to where they are. So you can predict them. You just need to reef in before you get to them, ride them out, and then continue out the other side. So from Gran Canaria over to Tenerife, we'll try and speed up the talk here because we've still got 4 islands to go. Tenerife, we didn't actually hang around on a whole lot because it is very popular and quite populated. We didn't really want to climb up Mount Tiede, which is the highest mountain there, because we knew that the cruise ships send all their people up there. But we had heard about these various, oh, there's Tiede.
3,800 meters, one of the highest mountains in Spain, amazingly, and it's there just sticking out of the sea.
Yeah. But we'd heard about these water mines, and particularly around this gorge, around these cliffs called Los Gigantes, the giants, and this big gorge called Masca, which we were so fortunate that it actually, we do get some tourists being dropped here and going up and down, but it had just closed. And we didn't know this. So we, in fact, had the entire gorge to ourselves, and we went off searching for these water mines. And in the Canaries, back in the day, whoever controlled the water controlled the power and were the kind of powerful families. And this just gives you a kind of idea of the scale of the cliffs there. The beach has some guardians, some 3 very, what would be the word?
Semi-feral cats.
Semi-feral, but particularly
friendly.
friendly cats, hungry cats, which we gave plenty of food to. And they would also act as our guides. As we'd heard the gorge.
Maybe 700 meters of cliff on either side of you.
Yeah, huge.
All different colors. Usually this is quite a popular walk, but we did end up clambering up a few bits. And what's really intriguing about it is that there clearly had been a lot of water here at one point or over the years to have created these huge gouges in the land. And I think the question of water in the Canaries is one which was probably almost what I was most struck by, how that it can be such a popular tourist destination, but yet there's virtually no rainfall in some of these islands. So how did they actually survive? Well, one way is through tunnels which we created some time ago, which they used to bring through water through the mountains. The tunnels are sometimes up to 2 kilometers through the mountains, which would have been mined in the past, often independently by a person just working by themselves with dynamite, making about 1 meter a day in some really hard conditions. And
this is actually up the gorge, and you can see, so once they'd actually found where the water was through the rock, they would have to then channel that right the way through mountains at a precise level to let gravity transport the water. And there's an actual mine where they were digging it out, and this is our friend Dean that actually lives on the island and gave us a bit of a tour of a mine that we knew. Okay, so we won't really touch more on Tenerife because we'll get to the other 3 islands, which are our favorites. So La Gomera, La Palma, and El Hierro. And really, the islands were kind of getting more and more interesting as we went west.
But also from Tenerife, there becomes a very distinct, and Gran Canaria, a very distinct difference between the north and the south, from it being very green despite there not being any rain, but moisture in the air on the north side from the sea, and very, very dry south side.
Yeah. So the south sides would be a moonscape, a volcanic landscape like what we've seen in Lanzarote and Portaventura, and then the north sides would be lush green. And particularly in these ones, they would pretty much be rainforest at the top, which will go on. So this is the sort of anchorages, and dry, but good for snorkeling and really well sheltered. So plenty of anchorages along the south of La Gomera, which there are no resorts or anything. There's no sandy beaches, and therefore no resorts.
In terms of anchorages, you sometimes have to be a bit more creative about where you go into than say the south coast of England.
Yeah, so we had there is often a swell, and you just have to be creative, setting out a bridle to put your bow into the swell. You might want to, I think here we put a kedge out the back and just aligned us up to it. Also, as I'm sure everybody that's listening is well aware that you can get really accurate swell forecasts now. So, when the swell is coming and it's going to be untenable, then sure, go into harbour. When it's not, then, go and explore the anchorages. There's also, we developed, since we didn't develop them, you can buy them, but a flopper stopper. Some of you may have used them, but they can be really effective for some boats. They don't stop the roll, but they stop the momentum. And you just hang it off your boom, and it grabs it sinks. Ours was just a piece of plywood with a diving weight on one end, and then it would sink and then suddenly rise to the surface, and it would roll, but it just would never get to the point where your dinner's flying across the room. And this is our favorite anchorage on La Gomera. And the name of the little disused fishing village here is
La Canera?
Calero, or we'd know if we got our notes.
It's an old, which is an old fish tinning centre, so there's no roads to it at all. And it's now in disrepair, but allegedly the new occupier, after 3 days of wine drinking, was able to take it over and is now sort of preserving some of the.
It's a bit of a
artisanal.
They're clearly doing some sort of art projects there, and a bit bohemian. Anyway, it's really nice little anchorage and a place to be. It's just feels really nice, and there's lots of lovely walks, and the snorkeling around the outside is just unbelievable. And Emmie did some painting of it. I actually haven't even seen these originals.
Whip them out. Mixed media pieces using some of the earth that we found, the rock and sand, and found materials including paper.
Oh, sorry.
That's right. Forwards.
And I actually we'd wake up here and you can see the lights coming over the rock, and the low light would filter through the windows and stuff, and it was just that everybody that knows their anchor, the way that the light dances around the boat. So I'm not really much, actually I'm definitely not a poet whatsoever, but I decided that I thought I might try and write something with a bit of footage.
Give me the sunlight and the sea, and who shall take my heaven from me? Kiss the decks and bear the dancing light. Sister sunlight, lead us from the night. Flowing, ebbing, ebbing, flowing, gathers wisdom past all knowing. wander like a white Greek maid, anew each day, dappled through your dancing shade. Roaming the bedsheets in the morning, searching, warming, adorning. Your presence is tender, but easy to miss. Like a smile seems innocuous, stealthy as a kiss. Give me sunlight and the sea, and who shall take my heaven from me?
You write that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With a bit of plagiarism. I think it's just the way that the light moves around the boat when you're at anchor is one of those things that you perhaps take for granted or you appreciate, but so kind of subconsciously, and that's why I did that. So here you can see La Gomera turning into the pine forests from the coast. Some, again, just fantastic walks. Very, very few tourists because you don't have the resorts in La Gomera. And getting greener and greener as you go up into the hills. And then it starts to turn into, cloud forest, and the moss starts. The walking tracks continue. And again, they have water mines there, or at least water routing, because a lot of the rivers or the water table run down one valley but not others. And when Emmie's parents visited, we thought best to save their knees, of course.
This was their round trip, but with an obligatory tunnel return.
Obligatory tunnel return.
Which my mum actually said, absolutely not, but somehow.
How are you doing, Jane? Is it above the waist yet?
No, but it's cold water.
Are you guys still back there?
Yeah, we're fine.
Swimming now, Tim.
Is that above your shoulders then?
Yes.
I don't know. I'll come very close to the top.
Yeah, I do.
Put your head down. I think we might move on, Jen.
Okay.
I think this might have been at the bit which had semi-collapsed as well,
I think given the time we'll miss this, but this is basically
Does anyone know what this might be? Because we didn't know what it was.
It's actually an Atlantic. Well,
we should have known.
And maybe we won't say, and then we'll see if anybody later on. We'll check the comments afterwards and see if anybody else knows. Anyway, you'll probably realise that we didn't eat him, because if we had, we wouldn't be doing this talk. So on to La Palma, and this is, I suppose this is just more kind of advice for anybody that hasn't been to La Palma or is thinking about going there. You'll see this huge ferry terminal on the left that's completely disused, built with European money, a double ferry terminal that's disused, but it makes a nice walking track or skateboard track if you're into that. This is Taza Court, and we're not a big fan of marinas, but it is, if you want to leave your boat there, it's both cheap to haul out and cheap to keep it there. It's dry, it's not humid, and Taza Court almost always, because of the topography, is overcast, so you're not going to get UV damage on your woodwork. It's a really good place to leave your boat long term, and they don't fuss over people leaving them there long term either, like some yards do. So if you want to haul your boat out and leave it there for 6 months before coming back, that is a very good place to do it, but you will need to book ahead. So La Palma is one big volcano with lots of mini volcanoes, and there is this route up through the hills and around the crater, which is about at 2,800 meters, called the Transvolcania route. And we thought it's not a great island to be sailing on, particularly you've got a few acceleration zones and not much anchorage, so we thought that would be a good place to do that big route.
Yeah, you really feel like you're walking in volcanoes, and it feels like it could erupt again. There's quite a lot of up on it, but you do experience all types of geography that you go through during the walk of several days.
And as you slowly get higher, you get out of the kind of volcanic terrain into the pines again, and lots of flowers, all flowering all year round. And that's the other thing, that you can sail in the Canaries at any point of the year. And if you need to escape the heat, you can just go up higher, and it doesn't matter what time of year, really. So once you get really high, you get into the cloud forest, and they have these, it's another water capture technique that they've got a lot of in the Canaries, and they put these nets up which capture the water. They drip down into these little trays and then funnel down pipes right down to the coast. And apparently they're really effective and working almost 24/7, because that humid air off the sea comes up, ramps up to 2,800 meters and forms that cloud forest. So apparently they get a lot of fresh water out of that. Particularly, that I didn't mention earlier, a lot of the groundwater that they get from the island is because it's volcanic, is very, very mineralized. And I tested it with a water meter for our desalinator, and it came out as about 1,500 ppm, which is high. I mean, they say 500 maximum from a water maker. Obviously, it's going to be different minerals, but it's not the greatest thing to drink. So by which point now we're coming up to the actual crater rim, and this whole rim is at that 2,800 with lots of observatories around it because of the lack of light pollution. And you basically walk along this big ridge that encircles it above the clouds. This is where we stopped for the night and had dinner, and we ate on this little promontory with the clouds. Obviously this is a time lapse, but you get the picture.
Clouds just like water.
And we were fortunate enough to come across this little refuge up there that we would highly recommend that you stay at if you decide to do an overnight walk. They've got some beds, no cooking facilities, but you can sit off on the roof and watch the stars, which are really clear up there. Hence why all these observatories have plonked themselves on the ridge. Okay, so where are we at? We're on an hour. So from La Palma down to El Hierro. What was your favorite island?
El Hierro, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't actually know that, but I would say the same.
It's it gets less and less commercial, and as you go further west, and wilder, more interesting. It's all interesting, but geographically also probably the most interesting area.
So this is El Hierro as we're sailing over to it.
Watching out for the unlit fishing boats, small unlit fishing boats at night.
And again, you can see, like a lot of the other islands, or like La Palma, it was one huge caldera or volcano, which has lots of mini volcanoes dotted around it, and half of it's collapsed into the sea. But you have the south side, very dry, very moon-like, moving over to the north side, which is very green. And El Hierro has, as you'll see in some of these photos, is the most diverse. You can go, there's 4 very distinct landscapes. You've got the volcanic, moon-like ground. You've got the Canary and pine, which is spaced out, lovely pine trees. Then you've got the cloud forest. And then you've basically got in this region up in the northeast, which is pretty much the Lake District, to be honest.
We're like Wales, yeah.
Yeah. And El Hierro is almost entirely renewable. It's almost completely off-grid. Well, it's not off-grid, but it could be. And what they do is they use gravity as their batteries. They pump, they have wave power and wind. They pump water up into these little volcano craters and then just use the gravity to pump it down. It's the perfect way of throttling their energy for the island.
So I think they particularly use this reserve when it's more settled. So when they're having less wave power, then they switch over to using the gravity of the water.
Yeah, so they run down on these tubes into and then just for hydropower, basically, to run turbines at the bottom. But there's a few things online about El Hierro being the most sustainable island in the world or something. And there's lots of
another Cesar Mani inspired building using the earth and the terrain to create architecture which blends in.
And you actually see a lot of the locals building like this, just really simple but nice houses with lots of light and lots of the local species growing. There is this is actually in La Palma, but it shows some of the native art, which goes back to 6,000 years, originally from the Berbers in North Africa. And interestingly, though, even though that's where they came from, when genetic studies were done on the different islanders, actually, once the islands were populated, give or take 6,000 years ago, the actual genetics between the islanders was quite different. So it just showed that once the islands were populated, they didn't really mix with each other very much, which I was surprised about. Here's another way of water capture. So in the cloud forest, this is a very old one, but the condensation would drip off the plants, and then they'd funnel them into these little pits. And we saw this in a few occasions, and also in one of the Catholic churches up on one of the summits. That's just an example of a village that's in El Hierro where you can walk around, and they've kind of renovated a little bit to show some of this isn't actually, these aren't indicative of kind of 6,000 years ago, but they were early settlers. That's the south coast of El Hierro, again, not a single resort or hotel in sight. And this is all a marine reserve, actually. This is just outside the marine reserve, but the whole south coast here is just teeming with marine life because it is a reserve. This is La Restinga, where we actually stayed for quite some time. And it's just a really sleepy village. I mean, I wouldn't say it was particularly picturesque. I mean, it was nice, but it wasn't particularly picturesque, but it just had a really nice feel to it. Lots of locals, lots of artisanal fishing boats, a few yachts coming and going, but
it's the most western and the most southern part of Europe by this point, so it feels a bit like the end of the world, or is where people will jump off before going across the Atlantic in some cases. Also, 2012, there was a huge eruption which took place a couple of kilometers off shore here. The village, the town got evacuated at that point, and pumice stone started to erupt out at sea. As a result, the sea around there became very acidic, and but has now recovered to some extent to actually reveal some incredible underwater life. so you can snorkel within the harbour as well. The sea life, there's a tortoise, there's a couple of tortoises. We went
Tortoises?
Turtles. There's stingrays that we went out at night.
But the town just has a really nice local feel to it. Just a real feel. It just feels genuine, and everyone's so friendly. And I know there was just this picture that we got here of one of the fishermen going around to the fishing boats. So on the left here, these small artisanal fishing boats, and his dog would carry his gear or lunch with him, and there would be a lot of the fishermen would have boat dogs actually, but it was just this kind of like just really relaxed, very Spanish, just chilled out atmosphere in Laristinga. And I think it was our favorite port, and we just spent quite a lot of time there just enjoying it. Here is a short clip of some of the diving there. So yeah, that turtle is actually in the harbour. The harbour's so clean that you can just go snorkeling around without having to actually go out into the reserve. Just thought we'd include this picture of one of the morays. And this is in the harbour also, just literally by our boat, with a nice sleeping couple. I'd try and creep up on him.
Yep, painting.
Emmie taking over the forward cabin as her workshop this time.
And yeah, and a portrayal of El Hierro.
Anything more to say?
No.
Okay. Yeah, so I just thought we just quickly could say there. So you can actually haul out here in Laristinga. It is, wait for it, £50 to haul a 43-foot, 17-ton boat out, and there it is in the yard. So if you ever need somewhere pretty good value to do some work, it's pretty good. And they've got a little chandlery, and they've got a jet wash. So take note of that if you want a bargain yard. I'm just going to play this clip of when we cycled around the island, because it's a good overview of the different scenery.
Yesterday just looked like it kind of bubbled up out of the surface, and in fact this island did erupt only in 2012.
So I'm doing a picture of this abandoned building, Casa Rosa. It had been some thermal baths we actually have come across on our bikes. I love pastels because they're very malleable. They're almost like working with paints. You can get your fingers into them, change the colours a little bit. and we've got our trusty bikes. Great way to see the island El Hierro, Canary Islands, and to really kind of see some of the details on the way around.
One of the really cool things about this north coast is that it gets battered by the Atlantic waves, and it's chipped away at all the volcanic rock, leaving these lovely little pools that you can walk down to and swim in. There's a few of them all dotted around the coast, but this is just one of them where we decided to take a break and stop to have a swim.
Not warmer.
So many times before. Every moment that I spend without you leaves me wanting more. And if I close my eyes...
And by now we've gone full circle around the island and cycling back up to the top where the cloud forest starts. So the pines have gone, the mist is coming in, so we parked up the bikes and thought we'd actually have a better look around the cloud forest or jungle.
Gone from volcano to jungle in like a matter of seconds.
And then back on the bikes again, back down through the pine forest. Some amazing sweeping roads through the forest, and then that gives way to the lava fields again, all the way back down to La Restinga, where the boat is hopefully still there after a few days. Thought we'd use up the last rations of our food from the cycle trip, watch the sun go down, and just reflect on what is such a cool island.
What's your friend called?
Shadowfax.
Shadowfax.
Shadowfax is a pink nose.
So that's all, folks.
Tim and Emmie, I hope you can hear me. Fantastic. Thank you very much. It was a beautifully choreographed talk in every sense. Dancing, poetry, artwork, and what a great place. Many of us have sailed through the Canaries, but really just used it as a kind of stopover rather than a place to cruise in its own right. So thank you very much for opening our eyes to it. There's a few questions on the Q&A, some from locals, so you're going to have to be on the top of your form. I'm going to try. The first question on the Q&A actually looks like it's coming from Scott Cunner, but I think he's in disguise, as many people are on these talks. It's actually David Tunnick. I'm going to try and find David so that he can open up his microphone, but there might be quite a few Scott Cooners.
Yeah.
David,
Okay.
can you open your microphone and come in there?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead, David. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Simon. Great talk. Unfortunately, I came in about 10 or 11 minutes late and then had to go in and out as I got it. It's a work day for me. I had to pay attention to the day job. And so I missed a little bit. And so excuse me if I ask you something that you may have covered. So I'm thinking of bringing my boat down from Northern Europe down to Portugal and then on for a stop in Madeira and onto the Canaries, where I'd like to cruise around for a week or two and then park it either in a marina or on land for about 4 months before crossing over the Caribbean in November. And you probably covered it, but I wondered if there is kind of an ideal route. I did see your chart and did make note of you basically, I guess, circumnavigated the islands. But if you could address some of those points I just brought up, questions I just brought up,
Yeah.
a route to follow and where to park the boat that's safe when the owner isn't there.
Yeah.
In terms of your initial landing spot, then it probably is where lots of people go to, and we'll know on here, La Graciosa, because it's just so otherworldly, moonscape and beautiful colours. And then in terms of a safe anchorage, safe harbour was definitely La Palma. It will be, I feel like it may be busy this year because perhaps people haven't been able to move their boats on, so it's always busy, so that is a consideration. And usually you have to take it out of there in September for the Ark. I don't know what the situation is with that.
No, in Las Palmas, you mean?
Las Palmas.
Las Palmas, yeah. Not La Palma, Las Palmas, in Gran Canaria. So the landfall at Graciosa, you have to apply for a permit to stay to anchor off La Graciosa. It's a windy anchorage, but it's secure and it doesn't get much swell. You can definitely make landfall there. We did in the dead of night, and you can also get that advantage of going up to Alagranza. If you've got that permit, you just apply for it online. It's dead easy. And if you've only got 2 or 3 weeks, I would say, I would just say go over to and cruise La Gomera, because there's lots of anchorages there, and La Palma and El Hierro. But then you have the problem of then where would you leave it? Because Gran Canaria, Las Palmas is a very good place to leave a boat. It's very secure, there's no swell, and you can definitely get in there. Although if you're not part of the Ark, then every boat that's not part of the Ark will have to vacate in September.
Yeah,
so, and you could, of course, if you needed to haul out, as I mentioned, there's a haul out in both La Palma, not Las Palmas, but La Palma in Tazacorte, and also a haul out in La Restinga in El Hierro. But 2 or 3 weeks, I don't know. You could do the whole lot in 2 or 3 weeks, but it'd be really rushed. And yeah, my favorites were Gran Canaria, La Gomera, La Palma, and El Hierro, really.
And Tim just briefly touched on the permit situation, which seems tricky when you first arrive for anchoring. So do you remember much more about this? It's not actually as tricky as it first appears.
Is this for La Graciosa?
But also I think Lanzarote, and that you need a permit for anchoring technically.
Not for the other islands, I don't think. Or at least if we never got asked or anything about those. The other thing is that a lot of the harbours in the Canaries are owned by, some are private and some are owned by Puerto Canarias. There is an app. You can call these ports on VHF, you can email them, you can call them, they will never pick up. But there is an app that you use for Puerto Canarias, and you book it through there, and you select your dates, and then you just get an email back to say yes or no. And it's very cheap. And we have left our boat in Puerto Canarias once. You just need, if there is a chance of them being snatchy, then you just need to put on sufficient snubbers and sufficient lines to deal with that.
Thank you very much. Very helpful.
And yeah, get in touch.
Get in touch.
And maybe write those names down for you, and if that helps, or for any other info.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you said get in touch where?
With us.
Yeah, I think our email will be available. Our contact details will be available.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you, David. We'll go next, I think, to Oliver Solanas Heinrichs, who I think, if I remember rightly, is the port officer for Fuerteventura.
That's a good name.
Oliver, do you want to come in?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear, Oliver. Go ahead.
Hello. Well, first of all, congratulations. That's fabulous webinar. It's been like really, really great. I'm actually the author for the cruising guide for the Canary Islands for Imre, which we did a few years ago.
Oh,
so
great.
I've noted a lot of things that you just talked about, and it's been very, very, very nice. I mean, the approach and how you presented the islands, it's really, really nice. I mean, you have seen a lot of places that most sailors do not see. You've been anchoring in places where most people do not anchor, which are not like the typical places to be anchored, and so it's very, very nice. You spend in the Canary Islands, you said 18 months. What I'm missing out a little bit is a little bit of information about the marinas that you visited, because obviously, as you probably experienced, the Canary Islands are not really an anchorage paradise, if you agree with me. I mean, you don't have those places. I'm actually right now in the Caribbean now. I will be back in the Canaries in a few months. So just a few hints about the anchorages. I mean, most of them are probably rocky bottom and swelly, and are not that protected. You've been very lucky, as I see, with weather, as you have anchored like in Los Gigantes, down South Tenerife, and well, the south of La Palma is always, sorry, south of La Gomera is always really calm. And El Hierro, I spent in La Restinga also many months with my boat over there.
Oh, great.
It's fabulous. About the questions about where to store the boat, as somebody asked right now, it's always a big question that we get as well, where to store the boat on the Canary Islands. As you know yourself, it's a big, big difference because you were in Tazacorte and you were in La Restinga. Tazacorte is a private marina. It's a concession given by Puertos Canarios. And then you have La Restinga, which is directly adhered to Puertos Canarios, which are the two, let's say, the big difference. If you go to a private marina, the whole out is very simple, very easy. Everybody does it for you. As you know, when you do La Restinga, first you need to ask the marina, the harbor staff, to leave the boat outside on the dock, and then you need to talk with the Cofradía de Pescadores, which is like the fishermen, because the haul out and the travel lift belongs to the fishermen. So congratulations, really, really big congratulations that you have hauled out your boat in La Restinga. And I wonder how you managed to talk with Juan Pedro in his English and with the fishermen to haul out the boat. So that's really, really good. One big question I want to do is about. I keep asking this. I'm involved into the nautical, into the government in the Canary Islands with feedbacks, and we still have a big problem with Puertos Canarios. A big problem with not only with calling them, that's very well known, channel 09, nobody answers, nobody will come, some places you ride with your boat, and then you go in, and the security guy is very friendly in some places, in other places maybe not so much. How did the app work for you? This new app of Puertos Canarios, what is your feedback on that?
So the app did work, but it was funny sometimes. Like we really wanted to be able to stay in Gran Tarajal. We knew that it would be reasonably okay for a few months, and that was kind of the area that we wanted. So we put in an application, it just comes back and says no. It doesn't say why, it just says no. So then we send another application in for a slightly different date, and it just goes no. And then we heard that they were having a regatta there. So we actually just changed our dates by one day, even though we were staying over 2 months. We put the day to start by one day forward because we knew the regatta was then going to leave, and then it came back as yes. And obviously someone just didn't care. They didn't want to tell us why, or they didn't think about emailing us and saying, oh, well, if you put your application in one day late, you can come. They were just like, no. So most people will have just passed it by. But we got some information. In fact, at Gran Tarajal, the port officers were the most unfriendly we had encountered. They didn't even look us in the eye. But then in other cases, like in where's the place around the corner in Tenerife?
On the north side.
Yeah, on the north side.
You might be able to help us with this actually. It's a small entrance and can get quite a lot of swell in it.
Oh yeah, I know where you mean. Garachico.
Garachico, yeah.
Yeah.
And they were really helpful, and the guy was amazing, and he would come and help us to move the boat, and it was just, it depends who you get.
He did also show us, though, as we were leaving the boat for 4 months, the massive storm that had come in not so long ago and had come right into the town itself, and with lots of people screaming and kind of water coming down.
And he was like, "Oh, this will never happen when you're here. Don't worry."
So it's just his private collection of videos which he showed us. But the boat was fine.
But to answer the question, the app, it did work, and we wouldn't take us that long to get a reply. You know, we might wait a day or two to get a reply, and predominantly it was quite good because we left the boat for 2 months in Gan Tarahal, and we used it. I mean, it worked.
But it is, yeah, as you say, it's the only way, and we didn't realize that to begin with.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised what you're telling me. Actually, in September, I'll have a meeting again with the government over there. And as you say, a few months ago, I just sent a notice also to the OCC that was published at the OCC, published at Moonside as well. If you check out Moonside, where I recommend sailors not to go through the apps, to any apps, try to contact them directly or another way, because those apps do not work. For instance, like in the capital, Puerto Rosario and Fuerteventura, that's actually where I come from. Also, the app says it's full, or they don't answer whatever, and there's plenty of space. So it's a pity, especially for the island of Fuerteventura, because a lot of sailors pass by, a lot of sailors don't go there because of this problem, because either they are not interested or whatever. I keep that for that comment for somebody else, but it's very, very hard. To question about the gentleman that asked about if he has 2-3 weeks, you probably agree with me that the Canary Islands is like a little continent. Every island is got for itself. If somebody asks me if it's only 2-3 weeks on the Canary Islands, I would ask him what he wants. If he wants to see volcanoes and dry, maybe be in Lanzarote. If they want to have nice beaches, they might be in Fuerteventura. And if they want to be like all of a sudden in a tropical forest, all of a sudden they are more on the western islands. So it really depends on what you want to see. Do you agree?
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of anchoring, then having a bit more time so that you can kind of change around where you are helps there, because it's not, as you said, it's not always suitable for anchoring.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you very, very much for this webinar. It's been very great, and I'm sure that I will contact you through your website, Chasing Contours. Thank you very much.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. We've got a question from Brian O'Flynn, and then we will go to Martin Smith after that. So, Brian, the microphone's open. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I loved your talk, Emmie. Well done. That was great. Excellent. Well done, both of you.
Thank you, Brian.
Followed you from Norway as well. Love your climbing and everything. And your dancing was really impressive. Happy memories from...
What happens with too much time without seeing many people?
Definitely couple after our own hearts, for sure. Now, we had terrific memories of La Gomera, and they have a whistling language there where they whistle to each other across the valleys. And they
we did hear that about that.
Yeah.
The other thing we came across recently was a sort of pole vaulting down the cliffs.
Yeah.
Did you? I don't know if you know anything else about that.
No, we do that, but there's the silbar is to whistle. The silbando is a local language there. And also I was intrigued to know that you met an indigenous person from the Canary Islands, because they have a local language, like guagua is like a bus, and guigui is taxi or something else like that. But they have a few few remnants of their local language left. And the other thing I remember from La Gomera was the bananas, and they had a cable car system for delivering the bananas onto ships on jetties just off the coast.
Oh, amazing.
Interesting.
It no longer exists, but that's how they survived. So, you know, that was part of their income, I think, up on the little villages in the mountains in La Gomera, which is lovely, and very happy memories of a musical session on a Sunday afternoon in the harbor there at San Sebastian de la Gomera, I think it was called.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think that
Quite
was the
bohemian.
island. That was the island that Cristobal Colon called into before he went to the New World. He made an offering there and went to mass in that island, in that ancient church on La Gomera. I think that was his last landfall before the New World.
And you can see a sort of reincarnation of his boat. Is it Santa Cruz on the north side?
Yeah.
Which is surprising how small it is actually. And I think it was a real life. Well, it was based on real life.
It was the Santa Maria La Pinta, and there was the other one I can't remember. There were three boats that he had. Yeah, but
that's interesting what you say about the language. We didn't come across the whistling language actually. That would be really interesting, and to know, and just to generally know more about the indigenous culture. But I did pick up the Spanish is slower there than Spain, and it is quite South and Latin American influenced, or it might be vice versa. And there's quite a few words which are crossovers.
They've just a few words have remained. I think, you know, that have survived since the ancient times. But I think
because that's such a long way away from Latin America that Guagua bus could be used.
That's right.
For example, in the same way.
That's right. Yeah, some of the language found its way across to the New World, to their New World, which is South America, you know, rather than North America for us, you know, for the Anglo-Saxon people, you know. But that's really fascinating. Really brought back very happy memories for us. Thank you. Well done.
I'm glad. Thanks.
Well done.
Thank you very much, Brian. Martin Smith, your microphone's open. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah.
Martin, you good to go?
This is Tom Wickland.
Okay, Tom, you go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. Great presentation. We want to stop in the Canary Islands on our way over to South Africa sometime next year. But I've got a couple of questions. One of them, does each island have like Wi-Fi or cell phone reception?
It does have cell phone reception. I mean, I don't know what it's like for other countries, but our provider under European law is open, and we use data freely. So we had plenty, in most places we had reception to tether onto our phones and use our laptops, and there was very rarely, I mean, marina Wi-Fi, while everybody knows what marina Wi-Fi is like, we would just tether onto our phones almost all the time, really.
Yeah, I only remember one occasion where Tim needed to go a mile out, a kilometre out in the dinghy for a sudden meeting, so in a few of the inlets, perhaps the slightly more remote inlets, you might not get reception, but it's generally quite covered.
Yeah, most of the time it was fine. If not, I would put the phone in a dry bag and hoist it up the halyard and then tether to my phone that way from my laptop. And then if that didn't work, I then get in the dinghy and go out to sea a little bit, because, you know, naturally on these islands, they would put the mast on top of the highest point and you would get a line of kind of sight. But most of the time, yeah, it was fun. And of course, if you've got a foreign phone, it would roam between the different networks and you would be covered by one of them at least.
So did you buy, like, is there like a cruising guide for the Grand Canaries that you would recommend?
We we're not very organized in that sense. We don't often really use them. We didn't have a cruising guide. We generally found anchorages using Google Maps and Google satellite view with the charts.
Noon sight.
Yeah, noon sight. Navally at that point was just starting to come in. In fact, most of the anchorages on Navally are added by us now. But
Navally,
no,
which is an app.
we probably should have had a cruising guide, but we didn't.
So, the final question. For the total time that you spent out there, you arrived, you said, around June, July, August. How many weeks did you spend in the Canaries?
So we actually went back. The aim was to arrive in the Canaries and quickly move on after a few weeks to Senegal. We were going to cruise Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, and then jump the pond, maybe then go to Patagonia, and that was all this big plan. We got there, started enjoying it a lot, and decided to stay on. And so in total, we were there to September,
a few months,
yeah, August 2018, and then didn't leave until July 2020 after lockdown. But of course, we returned to the UK and France for some of that. So in total, we were maybe cruising full-time 8 months. I don't know. A reasonable time. But we, we're locked down. We got the boat left there, and yeah, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 months permanently.
And the local wines were great, and the food was great too.
Yes.
What was that? The local what?
The local wines and food, were they great as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, I just love simple Spanish food. I love chickpea stew with like some, oh yeah, and they have limpets. So all over the island, you will see limpet shells up in some of the very old indigenous settlements that have gone to ruin. You'll see limpet shells because they were fantastic. They would take the limpets, they would put them on like some slate, stick them, and then it would be the perfect protein to transport around the island. And now they still eat limpets if you're into that sort of thing. But
they get the Western Islands get a reasonable amount of fresh. They cultivate fresh pineapples and various other fresh fruit and vegetables. So it's not so it's sort of quite hearty food. Quite a lot of it stews and beans.
Lots of fresh fish. You can go to the markets in some of the, like in La Restinga and Tazacorte, they have fresh fish from the market. I
wouldn't say it's big fusion sort of food there. No. It's quite Spanish or Latin American. The wine is interesting. Maybe is like it's quite, I think, strong and sweet probably.
Yeah.
But because the process of it, then it sort of adds extra flavors to it.
Yeah, because where it's being grown, it just adds to the experience, I suppose. The fishing is not so good. We tried fishing with a rod and that didn't work, so we ended up resorting. We fished quite a lot really from the boat, but we ended up really the best method for fishing, if you're willing to do it, is getting with a spear gun. That's the method that worked for us, really.
Well, thanks very much. It was a wonderful presentation. I loved it.
Thanks.
Tom, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the IMRE cruising guide to the Atlantic Islands, which was is written by my predecessor, OCC Commodore Anne Hammack, and she'd slaughter me if I didn't mention that one. She spends a good few months every year updating it. So
we should have had that probably.
We probably should have had that, yeah.
Yeah, you probably should.
But we didn't qualify for the OCC back then, so.
Oh, no. So we'll try Martin again, Martin Smith, and then we'll go to Tom Sperry if Martin's not available. Martin, go ahead. No, can't hear Martin tonight, but Tom Wickman. Tom, do you want to open your microphone? Come in.
I just went. Sorry, I probably jumped somebody. I just went.
Sorry, you did. I meant Tom Sperry. Terribly sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, got you.
Hi, Simon.
Is that Tom?
It is Tom, yeah.
Tom, please go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, Tom.
Well, that's kind of you, Simon, but I don't think I put my hand up, did I?
Your hand's up on the screen, on my screen at the moment.
It's a fumble. But I would like to say how much I'm enjoying this, having done a little bit of the Canaries myself. Finding out a little bit more about the more remote islands is really good, and it's been very, very interesting. Thank you.
Oh, that's no problem, Tom. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom.
Can you hear me now, Simon?
Yeah, can do now, Martin. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just first of all, the gentleman who came on first of all about if you're doing a crossing, it was great to provision in San Sebastian in La Gomera because the supermarket delivered directly down to your pontoon. You don't have to carry the food back yourself, so that was great. But what I was going to tell you, I'm a bit ashamed of this story, but the fish you showed, I think, was an ocean puffer fish. And
yeah, well done.
I caught one and cooked it, mainly for my wife. I think I got some meat I was going to eat. She only eats fish. She had a few mouthfuls and said, this doesn't taste very nice. So I had a mouthful as well and said, no, it doesn't, does it? So we didn't eat it. And only afterwards I found
And you didn't swallow it?
How poisonous they were, and we got away with it. So I think we were really lucky. So I'm a bit ashamed to tell you that, but it's best people people know. And you can identify it because it's got a sort of expanding belly underneath, hasn't it?
That's it. Yeah.
So I think we probably had a lucky escape.
And in Japan, you have to have a very specific license to be able to cook this fish.
Yeah, I think I've heard that. You have to have a 7-year apprenticeship, don't you, before you can serve that. But anyway, it didn't taste any good.
Thank God.
We were lucky enough to have already got some fish, so we just decided we don't need this fish tonight, and it looks sort of, there's something not quite right about it.
Yeah.
And God,
well, and they have a little beak, and in fact, the previous actually half of our lures were gone because we were actually using mackerel lines to begin with, and the beak had just snapped it off. So I think it's actually quite difficult to catch these fish.
1,200 more poisonous times more poisonous than cyanide was what we read a bit afterwards when we read it. But although maybe not actually, because if you actually ate some of it.
Yeah, we had a couple of mouthfuls, but obviously we had a lucky escape. I wonder whether it's a particular part, some sort of gland or something in the fish.
They also, I think, don't expect this really in the Canary Islands. It's the water has warmed up a little bit there, and it's perhaps something you'd find more in the Mediterranean usually. But it's sort of it's come south, as have a few other, various other species that the fishermen were talking about that was unexpected to find there.
That's a great story, Martin. Thank you.
Well, a great talk anyway. Thanks.
It's a bit of a self-fulfilling story that you're telling us, because obviously we wouldn't be hearing about this otherwise.
Yeah, no, I think we're lucky. As I say, a bit ashamed to tell people really, but there we are.
Well, but we kind of feel the same a bit about, having caught it and be considering it as well.
Yeah.
Well done, Martin. Jeff Mander's got his microphone open. Jeff, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, hi there. Yeah, thanks for the talk. It was very entertaining. Just a couple of points. It would appear I was in the Canaries over much the same time. I got there in 2018 and left early 2019. But I never did get the Puerto Canarias app to work. Just refused to do what it was supposed to do. After many phone calls, I did actually get to talk to the people who claim to be the app developers. and ran through all the list of problems I had with it, and they basically didn't care. They just said, well, we think it works, bye bye. So
yeah,
and tell you to go back to the app.
Yeah, but anyway, and the second one was the guagua. It's quite an interesting story. Apparently, the word actually, or the name, originated in Cuba, and it comes from the first buses that were imported to Cuba. Came from an American corporation that was called, I think, Washington and Walton or something like that. And the buses all had WA and WA on the top, written on the side. So the locals started to call the buses guaguas. There was a great deal of emigration from the Canaries to Cuba back in the 19th century. But a number of them came back to the Canaries and they brought the word back with them. So that's the story that I picked up. So
okay. Interesting.
Wow. But the sound of it also, and the intonation is not really quite mainland Spanish. It's quite different.
Yeah, well, yeah, things
that pre-explains it a bit.
There's different accents as you go around the islands and different variations. But anyway, that's the story that I picked up. So whether it's true or not, I don't know.
Thank you very much. Fiona and Ian Lewis, can you spell out the name of the app? Tim?
Sorry?
Puerto.
Yeah.
The app for
booking, so how you would book those ports.
Oh, yeah. It's the app for Puerto Canarias.
Do you want to write?
Yeah, I mean Puerto as in Spanish for Porto, and Canarias. You can see it on the Puerto Canarias website. Emmie's fluent in Spanish, so she's going to type it.
Oops. But not very fluent in writing.
Yeah, no, Ian Lewis could ask the question from roughly.
Yeah.
Next, we go to Matthew Thomas.
Hello. Question I had was, I saw you anchored on some of the north side of the islands, and my memory of them are very steep too, the very high cliffs. What were the depths of some of those anchorages like?
I don't recall us anchoring on the north side of anything really, because there was always going to be some swell. But yeah. I mean, on the south side, I don't think we ever anchored anything more than 8, did we?
No,
sometimes down to about 5, give or take. Always sand, could always see the anchor. I mean, it was always so clear. Yeah, it was always between about 5 and 8, wasn't it? Or we'd just make it that way. There was always tons of swinging room because there was no one else anchoring half the time.
Sounds delightful.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose I would note that there are some anchorages. So there's the anchorage in Graciosa, there's the anchorage at the bottom of Lanzarote, and the anchorage in Las Palmas. Those are the major kind of 3 anchorages that a lot of. Oh yes, I suppose outside the town. Yeah.
Like a big kind of well-sheltered area.
But the ones in Graciosa and bottom of Lanzarote get a lot of jet skis at midday, and which will infuriate you, but they're all gone by the evening. So, you know, it is what it is.
Great, thank you, Matthew. If anybody else wants to come in, just put your hand up, or any member of the panelists can open their microphones anyway. But I think we're coming towards the end of the questions and answers. But what a great talk! And yet you are a poet, it appears, Tim. Or did you plagiarise it?
I took some inspiration from a couple of other poems that I've got, or a few, or many other poems, but some of it is, I'd say 60% original.
The video was lovely, and the dronography was really good, actually. Excellent.
Dronography, I haven't heard of it.
Unfortunately, that drone as of about a week ago is no more.
The drone last week in the Yelm took a dive.
And then caught fire on board.
Yeah, so this is if anybody's got a drone on board, if it goes for a drink, don't bring it back on board.
Well, and you opened it up.
Yeah, because of years of using it and being very confident with it, I was lax. I was in the Yelm, I was on my own, and I thought, I'll take it off from the deck rather than take it off from my hand. I usually have it on my hand and it goes out and away from the boat, and then I bring it back. And I was lax. I took it off from the deck. GPS wasn't quite right, and it ended up bumping into a shroud, which is fine. But then it bumped into the mast and another shroud, and then did a 180 and landed in the water. I then managed to get it back with a fishing hook.
Magnet.
And I disassembled it in the boat that evening, took it completely apart and rinsed it. And then the battery suddenly started smoking, and it caught fire.
There's a living fire on board. That's what we were hearing about in a talk by Nigel Calder the other day. A disaster.
Yeah. So I mean, I was and there was this grey smoke everywhere, and I grabbed it, and I was just like, oh my god, and I couldn't put it out. I put it into some water, and it was just going. Yeah, it's terrible.
But it had done amazingly well, actually, to see us through quite a few years.
Yeah.
Well, time to upgrade. Gary Crothers, I think you wanted to come in, Gary. Yeah, a question about compressors.
Nose gets used to the odors in your home. That's right.
So, yeah, excellent video. Your photography is top notch as usual. You put us all to shame, really, with the quality of your photography and your painting, and not just your photography and your painting, but your choices of anchorages. You know, you've gone that extra mile. You've gone way more than ever I did in my limited time in the Canaries, and I'll just have to go back and follow your footsteps and do a wee bit more. Anyway, I just wanted to know about your obviously doing a lot of scuba diving there. Did you have your own compressor, or did you just rely on getting refills ashore?
We don't have a compressor. We have 2 bottles, and we only dive on our own up to 10 meters. So we actually get 2 dives out of every tank. And yeah, so there are places to fill it in the Canaries. So we'll get a couple of dives before we next go and fill it with water or something like that, and we'll get them refilled. And that worked for us.
Because there's a lot of diving shops, obviously, in the Canaries, and so we just kind of did it accordingly.
Yeah. Okay, excellent stuff. And did you invest? I know there's a lot of places where it's you need special permits to go diving in certain locations. Did you investigate the legality of this beforehand, or did you?
Yeah, it was okay. It was okay, actually. You weren't allowed to self dive in the marine park in La Restinga. You had to go with companies, but there were some fantastic groups there you could go with. Otherwise, yeah, they're open to it. And actually, one of the things that the Canaries do is a really good app for surf spots and for diving spots. And it's just this app you download, and you click it, and you get a 3D picture of the wreck or the reef and how deep it is, and exactly the long and lat, and yeah.
Because it looks like there's some really good wreck diving, probably, if you're doing that. And I think, doesn't the same app do walking as well, like different? And do we know the name of that app?
No, it's on the Canarian tourism website.
That's all right. No, I'm very jealous, you know, and I haven't returned to scuba diving yet, but it's on my to-do list. And that wreck that you're talking about, that you were able to snorkel out round there, you know, it's been on my to-do list. It's for at some stage, but hopefully I'll get there in the future. Listen, great talk. Thanks a lot for all your efforts. Great.
Cheers, Gary. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. We probably ought to wind up there. It's coming up to 10 to 9, I think, or 10 to 10 even. But lovely talk, and really, as usual, lots of different things all going on. And that boat of yours just accommodates so, and it looks so spacious, even though you've got everything loaded on there, bicycles, scuba gear, everything.